All right, welcome in to another edition of Carps Corner. Pretty excited about the show here, getting ready to head off and head out to Philadelphia, city of brotherly love for the Army-Navy game, but wanted to make sure we got one more show in here before the end of the week. A lot of things going on with Ohio State. So transfer portal huge this week. Coaching movement is big as well. So there's definitely a lot of things going on. Pretty important there. So we'll try to dive into all that. Got some sound from Ryan Day, some of the things he said. Some of the things Kirby Smart said as well with regard to Ohio State and the Peach Bowl and what he, has come to expect from Ohio State. And then ultimately, I've got, a couple clips from Eddie George. I got a chance to talk to the former Heisman winner, current coach of Tennessee State, and his current thoughts on what's going on in college football and how to ultimately make some of these kids tougher. So Ohio State in the Peach Bowl going to take on Georgia. We'll continue to break down that as we go. We got the mailbag that we'll also get into. But first, wanted to listen to this clip from Ryan talking about the transfer portal and everything that's going into it.
Certainly, this is a unprecedented time in college football with the portal and all that going on, and there's a lot of dynamics at play with that. But I think our culture is such that there's a lot of guys on our team that want to be Buckeyes moving forward. So we have those conversations and try to do the best we can to make sure that we're recruiting great high school players and developing them and keeping them in the program. That being said, there's going to be situations that occur where guys feel like maybe they have an opportunity to go play more at another school, and we understand that. It's something that certainly wasn't the case very long ago, but it's become a reality. And so I think communication is the most important thing, but we still focus most of our time on recruiting high school players and develop them while they're here.
So you hear that, talking about the portal, understanding everything that's going on there. And the important thing you want to have, strong culture. Everybody talks about it, culture. And what is it? What's how you act and what you believe. What are the core tenets and values that you hold near and dear to your program. And it's not just the things that you pay lip service to or espouse, it's what you actually say. And so if you have guys who you recruit, really good players out of high school, that want to be coached hard, that want to be great, I think you have less of a problem in the portal. Now you're obviously going to have some attrition. That's going to happen. It's happened in Alabama, happens, Oklahoma, USC, it's going to Clemson everywhere. There's guys leaving Michigan right now. But if you try to recruit the best guys, I think Ohio State's had 2 guys that have left the portal, and it's just going to be part of it a little bit. But if you have a strong culture, you guys who want to be Buckeyes, you sell them on the belief of Ohio State. Hopefully that will help. And we'll get into some more portal talk and coaching guys and just everything going on with Eddie George. But then I want to talk about this next. Kirby Smart had some comments here on his time playing Ohio State the last time when he was working at Alabama with Nick Saban in that game back in 2014.
Long day. It was a long day. It was physical. I think it was Ezekiel Elliott, right? I mean, yep. He shredded what was a pretty talented Alabama defense, and just remember a lot of explosive plays back and forth. I can't remember all the particulars, but I know they were very talented, very physical, and played with a very obvious purpose.
Yeah, so you can hear it in Kirby's voice. I mean, he knows Ohio State's got some dudes. 2014, tough physical running game, a lot of big plays. You remember the reverse pass from Evan Spencer to Michael Thomas, Devin Smith getting loose down the sideline, Zeke obviously ripping off. The X gains are what's going to make the difference. And so Ohio State, to beat Georgia, will have to have explosive gains. Kirby Smart understands that. He's seen enough of Ohio State. He understands their receivers are good. They can push the ball down the field. That's why I anticipate him bringing a ton of pressure of trying to get there. And even if he's not bringing pressure, with extra backers, looking at their defensive line, how good they are, making it a concerted effort to get after CJ Stroud to make sure that they can disrupt him. And so that's going to be a big emphasis in getting on what it is. But Kirby Smart understands exactly what this Ohio State team is. He understands the talent that they have, their ability to make big plays, and that, explosive plays are going to be the difference in the game. If you're able to, sustain drives, yeah, that's important too. But if you don't turn the football over, get those big explosive gains, and penalties, then there's a pretty good shot at it. Being able to have a close game in the fourth quarter, then who knows what can ultimately happen. I want to get in here to Eddie George talking about the transfer portal. You heard Ryan talk about it. Eddie's the current coach at Tennessee State, but really the guy won the Heisman Trophy in 95, tough, relentless worker. I got a couple cuts that are a little longer, but very, very impactful.
It's crazy. And, it's really hurting college football. It is hurting high school football in the long run. It doesn't allow our kids to persevere or be men of their word. And I get it. It's the business, and coaches leave different programs, as we just saw yesterday. And that's the nature of the business right now. What you're seeing is a miniature version of the NFL. It's free agency. It's crazy. I mean, here it is. You got a successful tackle at the University of Alabama who's played 2 years, and he's in the portal. And I'm like, okay, where do you go from there? Where do you go from Alabama? I don't understand. The only other step you can make is go to the NFL from there. And if you're unhappy at Alabama, where you're winning, where you got the resources, where you have a great quality of life, getting a great education, you're getting coached by the best coaches, you're in competition for championships year after year, and it's unbelievable to me just the landscape of college football and where it is right now. And the NCAA or some governing body has to do something about this because it's out of control. And what you're going to find is a lot of these young men are going to be left in the portal forever. 700 kids. I don't think there are enough schools to go around that they're going to find those opportunities. But we've got to start preaching, okay, persevere, compete for a position, see it through. I mean, I guess some guys have different situations they want to go through, but for the most part, this is the state of college football, and it's really not great at all.
So Eddie is a guy I have immense respect for, and he's a great developer and molder of young men and relentless worker himself. And so when you bring up things like, perseverance and develop in the portal, how he doesn't think it's good, hurting college football, like I take that very seriously. I know there's people that, love the portal. I'm all for player movement, but the reality is it's really tough to get better when you always have an out of where you can go. And I believe that players should be able to leave if a coach leaves, if they have issues, obviously at their school with, sanctions or whatever. And I think you should get one-time free opportunity to leave, but you should have to stay to school for 2 seasons and probably 2 springs to make sure that you've been fully invested. You chose that place, unless your coach leaves or things change, like I said, that you should have to go there and try to grow where you're at. Plant your feet and actually see if you can get better at a place you wanted to go there for a reason before. You should those same reasons should still be in effect. And now Eddie had an unbelievable comment here, and I said these are a little bit longer, but Eddie, man, he's so poetic with the way that he speaks. But he was a guy that I looked up to, and getting to Ohio State and coming up there in camp and hearing legendary stories about how the way, he trained with Joey Galloway and Orlando Pace and Mike Vrabel and all these guys, like just the way they would get after it and really grind out there in the hot summer sun. And that's what makes you great, in Eddie's, ascension to be able to get where he ultimately is, went through work and just grinding. It was never really handed anything, came up kind of the hard way, going, I believe, to Fork Union out of school, and then ultimately coming to Ohio State and then getting here. So this was, talking about the environment, and how it's changed, but, what the great parts of being able to grow and develop back then were.
The environment that we grew up in, Braves, me, Orlando Pace, Joey Galloway, it was iron sharpened iron. And it was hot summer days, and you're competing every day in the heat, the 10s, the 20s, the time lapse, the miles that you had to run, with Coach K, and you had to work and grind for that. And it was an environment not for the weak. And when I have, young men that I'm trying to convey that to, I am spoon feeding them that type of environment because they couldn't handle what we handled back then. There's no way, it will be way too difficult. So I've got to frame it in a way to teach them, to encourage them, to inspire them to say, if this is what you really want, if you want to be great, this is what it's going to require. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be rewarding later on when you're hoisting up a trophy at the end of the year that you won a championship or you won a Heisman or an individual award, or you're going on to the NFL and have a great career, or you take the principles of what you've learned from our program and you apply that to your life and you expound upon that. because the guys that we played with, like you mentioned, Vrabel, successful NFL coach, Luke Fickell, successful college coach, Joey Galloway, he's doing his thing on ESPN, just permeates within your DNA, and it transcends outside the game of football. So it's very difficult nowadays. You have to. I'm finding I have to strike a balance between, being that friend and mentor, and not being such the hard coach, the demanding coach. But I have to demand it. It's got to be a strike a balance in between the two.
Man, that's some really good stuff there. Like I said, I think he was one of my heroes growing up, and it's been unbelievable to get a chance to know him. But iron sharpens iron, and anytime I hear a guy say that, like, there are never any more true words that have been spoken. I know it goes back to being biblical and all these things, but that's the way it is. You've got to get pushed. You have got to be forged with other players around you and coaches that are leaning on you. And to change and to grow, there's got to be discomfort. And we don't necessarily like discomfort in society anymore. Like I said, I'm not against the transfer portal. I just think that there needs to be some discernment ultimately in when it's being used. And then the last one, he talks about re-recruiting your own guys and what that's ultimately like each and every year.
Every year you have to re-recruit your kids. Not only are you recruiting outside the walls of your facility, but you're recruiting your own kids, your core kids, to come in. Now, there's some kids that you want to encourage to move on because of academics, or they're not buying into the culture. They can't quite get it from that perspective. But it's one of those deals where it's like kind of like the NFL. You're courting your own kids. You're trying to get a gist of what they're looking for. It's hard for you to really drill down the disciplinary stuff that the culture trying to create, because it might be too hard for them. But that's where we are. You got to kind of cater and court your own kids and make sure that they're okay, that they have a nice, comfortable blanket, and they're eating well, and they've got a plethora of sneakers and shoes and sweatshirts to pick and choose from. You kind of always put that smiling face on and make sure that they're comfortable, and so they'll have a chance to say. And I tell my kids, I say, hey, I can get you to where you want to be, but you have to have the passion and desire and the willing to sacrifice to get there. And it's a give and take. It's a real relationship. So some kids that have that approach where it's kind of a me first, you almost don't want them in your program. And they're going to find that their life is pretty hard out there, that you want to be a part of a winning culture, and you want to learn what it is to be a man through football, to have responsibility and initiative and drive and perseverance and persistence. And you want to stay here.
Good stuff right there. Toughness, discipline, having to cater and court to your players. Like, it's tough, and it's hard because you love the guys and you know what's best for them, but you also want to make sure that they stay there. And this is the battle the coaches ultimately have to deal with, and Eddie George is dealing with it just like everybody else. Now time to get to the midweek mailbag here. First question, should Ryan Day hire a big-time OC or hire within? Everybody's talked about Brian Hartline potentially leaving because there's no movement for him at Ohio State. Well, this is what happens, man. Like, this is the way plans generally work out, is just when you think there's not going to be any change, there should be. So Kevin Wilson's taking the Tulsa job, which is great. I think it's perfect for him. Kevin Wilson should have been head coach 3 years ago. I don't know why he's been getting passed up. He's tough. He's smart. He knows how to run a program. He did a really good job at Indiana. If they just wanted to be able to have the buy-in, he understands it and what to do. So huge for him. Pretty excited there for him to be able to get that done. Hopefully, you can bring in a guy. They're going to have to bring in someone. But I'd like to see Brian Hartline potentially get promoted. But they need to make sure they bring in someone who, is good with the running game as well. I understand, they've got Justin Fry, their O-line coach. He's good. But just having diversity of thought and opinions there, like, that's all fantastic and all tremendous. So I would just probably promote Brian Hartline inside, and then but you're still gonna have to bring in someone else to kind of help out with tight ends and assist with the offensive line. Should OSU reach out to Jim Tressel to kind of come in now that he's retiring from Youngstown State to have like an advisory role, working in the athletic department, fundraising, raising money? If Tress wants to do that, I think that'd be great. Earl Bruce did that. Urban was doing that before he ultimately went to Fox, and then ultimately took the Jags job. I think that's something that he could potentially do. And I think it's something he'd be good at. Now, I don't know if he wants to move down here. I know him and, Ellen are living up in Northeast Ohio, and that's where they're both from. And so I think they like it up there. But Tress definitely loves Columbus, and he has a passion for Ohio State. And if he was willing to do that, I think that'd be tremendous. Question about the offseason. We're not going to get there. That will the Buckeyes have the running game that can keep Georgia off balance enough to make the play action effective? I think so. I wouldn't anticipate, Travion playing. I think Mayan Williams will be pretty healthy. Xavier Johnson getting in the mix. And then hopefully they utilize Dallin Hayden a lot, because I think he's a guy that could really make some big plays. He's a Tennessee guy, grew up in the footprint of the SEC, playing down in the Peach Bowl. This would be an awesome opportunity for him. I think they can. The offensive line played pretty well against Michigan. There were holes, there were opportunities, but you need backs to be able to get more than what the play is simply blocked for. So if it's blocked for 3 or 4 yards, you need a back that can go get you 5 or 6. And so hopefully that'll be the case. With the depth at wide receiver OSU, any chance these talented players would switch to corner, i.e. Chris Gamble? Seems like a good move considering a little weak at DB. It's very player specific on that. Has to be a guy that played defensive back that has the ability to do it. I mean, CG made it look really easy, but it's not. It's very difficult, very, very tough to do. So I don't think that's something that, they're probably exploring right now. And, maybe that might be something you get in the portal and, the development of the young guys. You got J.K. Johnson, Jair Brown, Jordan Hancock, like those guys are all going to be back. Denzel Burke, like they have a good young nucleus, just needs to be more consistent. The fact that we have blocked a few punts this year, wonder if we can use that in some way on the field. Big play in the return game, had some unfortunate mishaps going for blocks in bowl games. Do you block or do you return? That's always a big question, when it comes into punt returns. Ohio State's done a good job blocking, some punts. Lathan Ransom's been fantastic. As long as you're doing it the correct way, you're not going to get the roughing calls. And so they coach it right. Guys have stepped up. They've done it in an impressive way. And you've got to be able to field punts regardless. So hopefully they've got that hammered down. Initial thoughts on the matchup with Georgia also, as Coach Day says, we're going to play loose, but easier said than done. It's a huge game, a lot on the line. You felt a lot of tension in that Michigan game. And I think there was a lot of pressure internally placed on the guys, on themselves, just wanting to make sure they won that game, didn't want to lose 2 in a row. And it wasn't, they kept toughness, kept hammering that. And, I think it was important that, you come out and make some big plays, get some momentum. He never really felt like they got over that hump. And so you go back, you grind. And when talent equates, you resort to your training, especially in critical moments. And so I think that's something they're going to have to hone in on here to make sure that they're finding a way to make those plays. Ryan's got to call it aggressive game. Tell the guys, go out there and play, man. Don't worry about the mistakes. Go out and make plays. Go make the plays. Know the confidence comes in the game from you being prepared both physically and mentally from film study and everything else. So there's a lot there that they can dive into and they can ultimately get done. More questions. I will get to those this weekend. We'll do probably another mailbag show, answering some of that stuff. Got to catch a flight to Philly. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share. If you're watching this, you enjoy it, please continue to support it. And we'll catch up soon next week.